Baltiz is a beautiful and magical town, filled with happy people and children. But the Great Foreign War disrupts the beautiful town. People in Baltiz stopped believing in possible and magical things. Strange clouds take over the sky and things change. Peter is an orphan being raised by Vilna Lutz, the old soldier. Vilna advises the young boy to devote himself to a soldier's life. Vilna hands Peter a coin to buy fish and bread. He reminds him to return from marching. Peter sets off to the stall. The seller had reserved a bigger fish. But Peter refuses the offer and requests older bread and small fish. Unfortunately, the coin rolls off Peter's hands and stumps across the road. He runs after it and picks it up. But his eyes fall on a red tent. It is a tent where a fortune teller stays. Without a second thought, Peter enters the tent. Fascinated by the interior, his thoughts were cut short by the voice of a woman. The fortune teller stares at Peter's palm and utters some words. This scares Peter. Peter explains his story to the fortune teller and asks about his sister, whom his mother had given birth to during the battle. The fortune teller reveals to Peter that his sister was alive. She asks him to think of the right question worth his coin. Peter wants to know how to find his sister. The fortune teller gives him an answer, telling him to follow the elephant. Peter becomes angry and demands his money back, saying she cheated him. But the woman ignores Peter's rants and closes the curtain. Vilna Lutz is angry at Peter's actions. Peter reveals the answer the fortune teller had told him. Vilna Lutz tells Peter that his mother and sister had died, but he managed to save Peter. He asks Peter to bring a book to the top shelf of the kitchen cabinet. Peter obeys and brings down a book of fairy tales. Vilna tells him the story of Romain de Smet, a young soldier whom he served with. The book always reminded de Smet of home, his mother, and comfort, but Vilna claims he stole the book from him. Vilna mentions that de Smet became the most fearsome soldier in the army afterward. He scorns Peter that the fortune teller had told him a fairy tale. There are no elephants. Suddenly, Vilna hears a noise and asks Peter to hand him a spyglass. Peter brings the spyglass. The old soldier peers through the spyglass and sees cats around the littered waste. He instructs Peter to start marching and continues staring at the cats through the spyglass. Underneath Vilna's room, Captain Leo Machien and his wife eat dinner. Unfortunately, the ceiling bangs and disrupts their dinner hour. Captain Machien calls out to Peter from the balcony. Peter explains to the captain that he has to march because he spent dinner money on a fortune teller. Captain Machien gives Peter a what-if after hearing his story. However, Captain Machien's wife calls him and he walks back to the room. Across the town, people troop into a hall to attend a show where the opening act is a magician. The magician fails to do any trick and the crowd laughs at him. He offers to do a final trick and requests a volunteer. The magician calls out an old woman among the bored crowd. He decides to try a powerful spell that will restore and revive all of Baltiz. The magician begins to speak a magical language. The crowd becomes interested in the magician's act. On sighting no change, they boo again in disappointment. Suddenly, an elephant trumpets and falls on the stage from the ceiling. Back at Vilna's house, Peter dreams of his baby sister. He wakes up and runs back to the fortune teller. But to his discovery, the tent was no longer at the spot. Peter asks passers-by, but nobody knows about the fortune teller. On hearing the story about the magician and the elephant, Peter runs off in excitement. He bumps into Captain Machien. Peter tells the captain that he will sneak or fight his way in, just to see the locked-up elephant. Captain Machien offers to speak to the Countess and her advisors on Peter's behalf. Peter runs home. Vilna speaks against the elephant, but Peter tells the old soldier that the elephant was no fairy tale, and that it is presently in the town. Peter argues with Vilna about his sister. He promises to find his sister, whom he believes is still alive. The magician is locked up behind bars. His magic tricks to open the door end up futile. The old woman, Madame Lavon, who the magician used for the trick, shows up in a wheelchair. She accuses him of crushing her leg on stage with an elephant, and promises to make the magician stay behind bars. Captain Machien practices how to approach the Countess. The Countess gives the captain a chance to speak. Rather, he asks to know where the elephant was kept. The advisors attack him, but he only intends to know as the captain of the palace guards. The advisors plan to destroy the elephant since the magician is unable to make her disappear. The Countess asks that they meet the next day. She mentions that the elephant may need to be gotten rid of, as she takes the safety of Baltis very seriously. The advisors all agree with the Countess on the only sensible solution. Instead, Captain Machien finds another way to keep the elephant alive. He sends a telegram about the elephant to the king, who likes to be entertained but has never been to Baltis. The telegram gets to the king, who sets off immediately to see the elephant. Captain Machien, on getting feedback, announces the news to the Countess and her advisors. The people all gather to welcome the king. Peter sneaks out of the crowd and climbs a fence unnoticed. Captain Machien catches him and tells Peter of his plan. The king arrives and Captain Machien becomes distracted, leaving Peter on his own. The attention of the crowd is called to the elephant by the tinkling of glass. The elephant is unveiled and trumpets loudly, with colorful paint on her body. The crowd becomes amazed and claps at the sight of the magnificent creature. Suddenly, the eye of the elephant changes, and she becomes agitated. The people scream and Captain Machien asks the guards to protect the king and the Countess. Guards suddenly rush in with their rifles to shoot the elephant. Peter objects and steps in, trying to protect the elephant. Captain Machien orders the guards to put down their rifles and asks Peter to step away. Instead, Peter damps a cloth in water, in a bid to clean the elephant's eye. But the elephant sends Peter to the floor with her trunk. Gently, Peter approaches the elephant again. She becomes quiet and allows Peter to clean her eyes. Peter offers her water, which she takes to the awe of others. She washes the paint off her body, and the crowd claps for Peter. The Countess offers Peter a stay at the palace to tend to the elephant. He rejects the offer and tells the Countess that the creature is supposed to lead him to his lost sister. Peter asks the Countess to give him the elephant, but the Countess warns him that the elephant is dangerous. The excited king steps in and asks Peter to do 3 impossible things in exchange for the elephant. The king drops Peter's first impossible task, a fight with his toughest soldier. He gives Peter his saber. Captain Machien offers to teach Peter how to fight with a saber. Peter accepts the king's task to fight the next day at noon. At the fabric store, Captain Machien teaches Peter how to fight. His wife is pessimistic about Peter's win. The couple argues further, but Peter leaves to practice on the mannequins. Captain Machien suggests they adopt Peter, but his wife objects to his suggestion. At an orphanage home, Adele wakes up from her sleep. She wakes up the sleeping Reverend Sister. The young girl tells the Reverend Sister of a dream of an elephant that came to take her somewhere. The Reverend Sister admits that she has never dreamt of an elephant. She reveals how she brought Adele to the orphanage and named the young girl after her deceased mother. Meanwhile, the elephant dreams of her family. She wakes up from the dream and realized how impossible it was to belong among humans. Peter enters and speaks to the elephant. He begs her to show him where his sister was. Peter carries the elephant's trunk to a point on the map, but the creature plays with Peter instead. He offers the elephant a fruit and prepares to leave. She, in turn, squeaks and offers Peter a fruit. In the prison, the jailer tells the magician, who stares outside the small window, that a boy is fighting for the elephant. Everybody gathers to watch the fight, even the Countess and the king. Captain Machien brings Peter to the fighting ground and reminds him of some fighting tips. Peter's opponent comes out, a hefty man wearing armor. The king introduces the man as Sergeant de Smet to the crowd. Peter runs off, on hearing the man's name. He hides behind a pillar and remembers Vilna's story about Romain de Smet, the young soldier. Peter figures out that he needs to get the book of fairy tales that belonged to de Smet. Unfortunately, de Smet catches up with Peter and pursues him again. Peter dashes to the stall and grabs the biggest fish, using the king's saber as payment. He dives into the water with the fish. Peter enters the street and drops the fish for the cats, just to distract Vilna. He tiptoes into the room and collects the book. Peter presents himself to de Smet, the book in his hands. De Smet rushes to kill Peter. Peter raises the book high for the hefty man to see. De Smet drops his sword, as he remembers the memory of his mother reading the book to him. He becomes sorry. De Smet surrenders on his knees. The crowd cheers on seeing Peter win. In the hall, the king hugs and congratulates Peter on his first task. To the surprise of everyone, the king asks Peter to fly to the square by noon. The town is filled with hope as they all anticipate Peter's flying. At the orphanage home, Adele becomes excited and runs to tell the Reverend Sister that she heard an elephant appear under miraculous circumstances in the city. She begs the Reverend Sister to allow them to go see the elephant. But the Reverend Sister tells Adele how unsafe it is to go to the city. Finally, she agrees to go to the city with Adele. In the prison, Madame Lavon laments again to the jailer, the butler, and the magician about her predicament. The magician tries to explain to her and performs silly tricks. Peter practices how to fly with winged toys and drawings. Vilna yells and tells him that soldiers do not fly. He mentions that Peter's victory over De Smet was out of luck, but flying is impossible, and he will die just like his sister. In anger, Peter grabs his drawings into his bag and leaves. He screams and attracts the attention of Captain Mayten and his wife. Peter vents his frustration to the couple. Instead, they invite Peter to join them for dinner. Peter is excited as he eats the stew. Captain Mayten puts more stew on his plate. The Reverend Sister enters Baltese with Adele. She tells the young girl that they will leave the town as soon as they see the elephant. The Reverend Sister holds Adele tightly against danger. Meanwhile, Vilna looks for Peter through his spyglass. Simultaneously, the Reverend Sister and Vilna remember past events during the war. Vilna recalls saving Peter while leaving his sister behind. He regrets not taking them both and thinks the sister had died. The Reverend Sister, on the other hand, thinks that Vilna and Peter are dead. It is morning. The king and the Countess ride to the square. The king notices that the Countess has never laughed. The wagon driver tells the king that the Countess had lost her brother in the war and has never laughed since then. Peter walks slowly on the roof of a tall building, but he slips off. He struggles to get back on the roof. At the end of the roof, Peter jumps off and opens his bag. A piece of red fabric, held by strings, flies out. The crowd, including Adele and the Reverend Sister, cheers as they see Peter flying up in the sky. The king presents the last task he asks Peter to make the Countess laugh. The crowd disperses and the Reverend Sister loses track of Adele, who had run to see the elephant. Adele speaks to the elephant and touches her. She sees Peter grumbling and sends a punch to his elbow for insulting her. They both apologize to each other. The Reverend Sister interrupts them and takes Adele away. It is night and Vilna finally confesses the truth to him. His sister is alive. The old soldier apologizes to Peter and tells him the full story. Vilna assures him that the last task was possible. Back in the prison, the magician admits to Madame Lavon, the butler, and the jailer that he had lied and was not a good magician. He confesses to them that the disbelief he faced on stage broke his heart with a conviction that extraordinary things are possible if only they believe. Peter plays with the elephant in the hall. The elephant squeaks and pulls him closer. As he falls asleep, Peter dreams of playing with the elephant and her family. However, Captain Mayten and his wife wake Peter up. It is morning and Peter sights everyone ready to see him perform the last task. Peter starts his joke, but the crowd sighs and the Countess fakes her laughter. The king tells Peter that he failed. Peter begs the king to send the elephant back to her family, but he refuses. The guards proceeded to grab the elephant, on the king's orders. The animation pauses, as the fortune teller walks around and places a cat beneath the elephant. The elephant sniffles and spills mucus on the king's body. The Countess starts laughing at the king. Everyone, including the king, joined in the laughter. The king finally admits that Peter had passed the task. The crowd cheers as the king congratulates Peter. Peter tells everyone that only the magician could take the elephant home. Back in the prison, the magician laments that he is a failure. Madame Lavon motivates him, and Peter mentions his belief in the magician to set things right. Meanwhile, Adele convinces the Reverend Sister to follow the elephant and the crowd. Vilna, the old soldier, picks up his walking stick and joins the crowd. Peter plays with the elephant and kisses her goodbye. The magician asks the crowd to believe and speaks a magical language. To their surprise, the elephant disappears. The clouds suddenly clear and there is sunshine in the town. The Reverend Sister sees Vilna and recognizes him to be the soldier who saved young Peter. She also recognizes Peter. Vilna shows Peter his sister, and the siblings reunite. The young girl punches her brother and scolds him for jumping off buildings. The magician begs for Madame Lavon's forgiveness. He performs a trick and gives the old woman a bouquet of lilies. Madame Lavon calls the magician her friend as he leaves the town with his bird. Baltese becomes restored to normal. The new family created eat dinner together. The elephant returns to her family, with Peter in her memory. The town becomes a magical town once more, as Peter and his sister play with magic. This is where the movie ends. Thanks for watching, see you soon with a new movie recap. Till then, stay happy and chill out.